Good morning. We are going for a tour about museum, about IT. So that's where we're going this morning, and somebody was really late, and it was not me this time, so we can do it. So yeah, we're just leaving Sheffield now, and hopefully we shall arrive around 10:30 because we're late. We're meant to be there like around 10. Yeah, so see what happens. So yeah, we're just going on a IT trip. So we'll see what happens.
Let's see how we get on. Wish you best of luck. And here they come.
Oh, wait. Yeah, Sheffield University.
The song Sexual Healing was a top 5 hit in 1982, for which legendary soul singer? It was Marvin Gaye, 3 points. What type of girl did Beyonce sing about on her 2004 top?
Have you seen the power cable?
What is it? Is that the one?
Where's the power cable?
That looks pretty sick. Like that as well, old school.
My granddad had one of these.
So that's a paper, yeah?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, you're in plot C at the moment. We have 3 exhibitions in this building.
Hey, I want another.
I believe you're doing a cyber security workshop session, so it's probably worth you going to look at the cyber security exhibition. And just the other side of the cafe, where it says entrance, is the main entrance to Bletchley Park. And that starts with a short 10-minute video presentation, which is sort of set the scene for your day. So please find some time to go and see that. When you've looked around this building, you go out the double doors at the end and turn right and go up the park. The next building you come to is
Yeah, so what have we got here? BBC. You got Codebreaker. Man, that's back in the days. And go special networks.
Alicia, do you have another map?
Yeah.
They became raiders of the sky, and the need to fathom a means to destroy them increased. The British installed anti-aircraft guns and searchlights. In response, the Germans flew the Zeppelins higher. At such altitudes, crew needed oxygen. The weather was less predictable, and navigation or even training. The Zeppelins sent and received a stream of wireless messages to help avoid getting lost. But the UK was already equipped with a substantial chain of listening stations. The airships might as well have been broadcasting directly to the British operators, waiting for their transmissions. The British rule on air defence was being rewritten on an almost daily basis, with no prior experience to draw on. Air defence tied up nearly 17,500 men.
The challenge. Location was the secure. Back in the days. So lay yourself. So bing, bing, bing. So that's what they used to use back in the days. Step 1, listen
Isn't there some special job in
to the
civil,
enemy.
something to do with wireless and intelligence?
Yes, there is. You probably mean operator special.
Yes, that's what I've heard of.
What sort of job is it? Well, as an operator special, you have to be able to work with wireless. That is,
Where?
and read any more signals and then enthusiasm. Because there will be times when the routine will seem nothing.
I like the way they're talking.
But remember, you'll be doing a job of very great importance to your country's
I've
war.
never met anybody
As
who
well as
talks
Germany
like that.
Yeah, very posh.
I think it's for the BBC.
Yeah, it's like, wow.
or in code, or in some foreign language, say French, of which you've no knowledge at all. After a few weeks, your reading will be so good that you'll be put onto a wireless set to learn to tune in and pick up messages from all parts of the world. In this vital work, you will be expected to be discreet. You will have to fight the great temptation to speak about your work, even amongst yourselves. Your highest reward will be the knowledge of a job well done. At first, they let you play with this, but not for long. Constant attention is necessary. You can never relax. There's no repeat on the wireless. If you miss it, it's gone. Training, the long hours of duty shifts have not been in vain. We're on the prompt receipt
So
of
I
such
need
messages as this
to
the success or failure of your
choose
work.
the right one.
Your skill and perseverance
Yes.
will
No.
be giving great assistance to our military intelligence.
Get going. Okay, and then did I see that one a little bit? Yes. So that is Morse code back in the days. That's what they used to. Yeah. So as you can see, they've used something at the top, which is different, which is presenting the letters in the normal sense. So it need to be sent for decryption, which means the data is hidden. They can able to see it.
By doing these things, our service is making its vital contribution to the country at war.
Okay, so we need to know what it means.
We must live up to this, the
Okay,
emblem of our service.
I've done that already, so I don't need to do that again. I think it's really important to be able to come to this museum, especially somebody's doing like IT, cyber security, all this kind of stuff, because sometimes it's really hard to know the importance of knowing, like, for example, encrypted, and knowing how to use those kind of skills. It's really hard to know into a daily how it was used, and being able to come to this museum and be able to see how important was like encryption, important or how to coding was. Then it was going to motivate you in order to, when you're doing your course, when you're doing all this kind of stuff. Yeah, and it's going to help you just to be able to see how important those skills are. Especially when you're doing like cyber security and this kind of stuff. So yeah, and it's really nice just looking at back the history and how people use the skills and stuff. So yeah, we're just gonna go take a tour and then see what happens. So just enjoy the show with me.
You don't need any special qualification. You could learn to read it as easily as you learn shorthand or typewriting. The honor will send you to a special...
We are here on challenge 2, breaking. Okay, so open.
To do this,
Okay, I'm up. Ouch. Oh.
until you hear its rhythms as letters, never thinking about dots and dashes.
Open.
Importance to your country's war effort, as well as
Like, yo, imagine just doing that back in the days, like creaking and creaking.
when you You'll be able to take down any signal, whether it's in English or
Look at that, yeah. That's like
language, say French, of which you've no knowledge at all. After a few weeks, your reading will be so good that you'll be put onto a wireless set to learn to tune in and pick up messages from all parts of the world. In this vital work, you will be expected to be discreet. You will have to fight the great temptation to speak about your work, even amongst yourselves. Your highest reward will be the knowledge of a job well done. At first, they let you play with yourself, but not for long. Constant attention is necessary. You can never relax. There's no repeat on the wireless. If you miss it, it's gone. After 18 weeks of training, you're posted to a duty station where you work in shifts. There's no time to speak when you're on duty. You're there to listen with all the concentration you possess. 2 taps of a pencil are all that is necessary to call the attention of your supervisor to a message just received. That message may be of tremendous importance to the branch you serve. The long weeks of training, the long hours of duty shifts have not been in vain. For on the prompt receipt of such messages as this depend the success or failure of your work. Your skill and perseverance will be giving great
so
assistance
yeah, this is IT. This is like cyber security, all this kind of stuff. It's mad, yo. Look at this, yo. It's for computers, man. Ugh. Makes sense of nonsense. So you send a message making sense of the data which was encrypted, and then you need to translate the message in order to understand what was written. So some code. So again, once you understand what language was used, then you can be able to break it. So as it says here, Japanese or whatever language was really hard because it was not really something popular in the UK. So let's go. So this is Japanese trying to understand the language. So we're there. So that's where trying to understand the language. And then once you understand the language, you can break the language. That look like musical. Yeah, that's like music notes. Yeah, this is a music note. So you try to understand what it is, then once you understand the language, you can break it. Where are we? So now your cross references. So everything you got, the information, then you break it down, make sure you make sense of it. And then from there you can send the information of everything that you got. And that's how you do it. So just showing how important it was to be able to get people to write the code, break the codes, and then make sense of it. And then once you make sense of it, then you can analyze it. So
1942. In North Africa, codebreakers locate and track enemy units and read enemy plans. When the Africa Corps make their last move, the Allies are waiting. Allied leaders turn their attention to the invasion of occupied Europe. The German defences on the French coast are impermeable. There is only one way to break through. Surprise. The Allies scatter lies in the path of the enemy. The invasion will happen not on the beaches of Normandy, but at Calais. Codebreakers confirm the lies have been swallowed. Mathematicians and engineers are developing the world's first electronic computer. They are deciphering messages faster than ever before. At the 11th hour, they report, Hitler believes the Allies will land at Calais. The invasion begins. Allied forces land on the beaches of Normandy. They strike out into France and fight their way to Berlin. Victory in Europe.
Today is Victory in Europe Day.
Okay guys, we just had some food. Now we are walking to the next stop. Look at this, so beautiful. I think when they were stuck with the cold and that kind of stuff, they could just come outside, enjoy the air, figure out what's going on with the program, recording, and then go back and start doing the work again. So here, I think now we're going to be guided by like a tour guide, this kind of stuff. So let's see what happens.
My name's Stuart. I'm going to be your tour guide for about the next 45-50 minutes. The tour really focuses on the history of Bletchley Park, how it came to be, how people were recruited, some of the social side of things here, and really an overview of the job that Bletchley Park was doing. I'll leave it to my colleagues when you go into your workshop session to go into the more in-depth stuff about the science and technology of it, but this is the background to what Bletchley Park was and what it is now. Okay, well, I'm going to begin the tour right over the far side of the site. So a bit of a walk, equally walk.
You said that way.
So was there anything here or they built it from scratch? Was there anything here before or they built it this location?
The estate was built up in the 1850s.
Right. What was it for?
It was the country house of a member of Parliament and a member of the banking business, a man called Sir Herbert Leal. And he built the estate as his country house to go hunting, shooting and fishing with his rich and powerful friends in the Buckinghamshire countryside.
Yeah.
And I'll cover this in a bit more detail later on, but he died in the mid-1930s, and then the estate was put up for sale. Quite difficult to sell, as it turned out. It was broken up into smaller parcels, some of which was sold off for housing and development, but this bit of the site was bought up by the government. Right. And they turned it into a codebreaking centre.
So was it a good location during the war, those kind of stuff? Or?
It was good because of the communication networks available, again, which I'll cover in a bit more detail later on.
Yeah.
And because it was fairly isolated. And if you're building a top secret government institution, where better to put it than in the middle of the countryside?
And I've seen that there's also like, I don't know, I think how they were recruited, those kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think, because I'd seen a railway.
Yep. Yes.
So I think, would that be, I believe it's...
I will cover this. I'll cover all of this once I get going.
Good.
Okay. So I'll keep you in suspense for a few minutes.
Okay. Good. Anything else? I don't know what to say right now.
Okay. I'll be covering lots of stuff, and then I can fill in any gaps if you want as we go along.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So yeah, it's just walking, having a tour. So which is this? Yeah, this is my first time being here.
Okay,
So,
right.
yeah.
We'll stop round about here, and if you come this side of me, then the sun won't be in your eyes. Assuming the sun of the 19th century as a country house for a rich banker and member of parliament, a man called Herbert Leon. He bought this to become his country estate, become hunting, shooting and fishing. Built the mansion, built the outbuildings, which we'll see as we go around. Originally, at that time, the estate was about 3 times larger than you see it nowadays. Various bits of it have been sold off over the years for housing. But at that time, it was this big country estate in the middle of nowhere. Railway station did exist, serving Bletchley, which is a little market town. But none of the housing was up. Milton Keynes didn't exist. Really, a quiet country retreat. He died in 1935, I think it was, and so the estate went up for sale. Difficult to sell it, but eventually it was broken up into parcels of land, and around about 1938, the government was looking for somewhere to build a new code-breaking centre. They had a code-breaking department called the Central Cypher School in Whitehall, but they could obviously see the rise of the Third Reich across Europe. Obviously strong indications that Germany would eventually try and invade Britain as part of the campaign to take over the whole of, to build Fortress Europe. And the government obviously wanted to get one step ahead of the Germans, and obviously a great way to do that is by knowing what they're saying to each other. But that's where the problem lay, because the Germans were communicating in a code that the British government could not break. So they decided to radically expand their code-breaking department. They preempted the Blitz, obviously based on their knowledge of the start of aerial bombing during World War I and what the Nazis were already doing in Europe. So they made a decision to build the code-breaking centre outside of London to keep it safe from bombing. And also, if you're going to build a vast code-breaking centre, build it in the middle of nowhere, less chance of anybody finding it. So, government scouts went on the prowl, trying to find suitable places. A group came up here on the pretext of being country gentleman looking for somewhere to rent, also to go hunting, shooting and fishing. I went under the pseudonym of Captain Ridley, and a group who called themselves the Captain Ridley's Shooting Party came up to view the estate, and on behalf of the government bought the estate in 1938. To commemorate that, there is a Wetherspoons in Bletchley named after Captain Ridley's Shooting Party, should you want to detour on your way home. Anyway, so the government bought the place and they moved the 150 members of the code-breaking team into the mansion, and then started a massive recruitment drive and expansion program. First thing was put up some buildings where you can house all the workers. If you want to obviously build things quickly, best way is to prefab them in a factory and bring them here and bolt them together on site. Hence all the wooden buildings and the stuff made up of this composite board, asbestos-ish like. And they could be built off-site, brought here, bolted together in no time at all. Then the recruitment started. That's where they discovered, in fact, that they really had hit the jackpot in the location they bought, because this is the map, in a 1930s map of the south of England. That's Bletchley, that's London. So that red square there is enlarged here. So Bletchley, London. The London to Birmingham railway line existed then as it does now, so there's London, there's Bletchley, so great communication with central London, but also in those days was the west-east railway line, with Oxford at that end, Cambridge at that end. So the top codebreakers got on the train and went to Oxford, Cambridge and London universities and headhunted all the academics they could find, maths, languages, any sciences they could lay their hands on, and also unusual things like philosophy, based on, if you can work your way through Kierkegaard or whatever, you might have a chance of breaking the Enigma code, and experts in things like Egyptology, on the basis, if you can work out what hieroglyphics mean, maybe you can work out what the German codes are. So this disparate group of academics was recruited. They were then told to headhunt their top students and they were told you are required for war work at Bletchley Park. The alternative, obviously, for the majority of these people was to be called up for national service. Some of the people who were headhunted to work here saw that as a comfortable option, something, brain stretching to do, but and safer. I mean, significantly safer pushing a pen in the middle of the Buckinghamshire countryside than marching towards machine guns with a rifle, somewhere in Normandy. But equally, others had a sense that this was almost like a coward's way out. There was this dilemma of, do I go and fight, hands-on for my country, or do I do war work here? So that was part of the dilemma some of the people felt here. Amongst that group, obviously, the academics was the comparatively small proportion of women who were attending university at that time. Even though some of them recruited to Bletchley Park from the universities were obviously the academic equals of the men, they were recruited at a significantly lower pay grade. It's 1939, remember. We are in a very different position towards equal opportunities and equal pay than we are now. So about 500 university people came here, but they were deemed to be the brains of the organisation. They then needed people to do the running of the place, the communications, the management, making this place work. So the government turned to the armed forces, and about 2,500 personnel from Army, Navy and Air Force were directed to be stationed here at Bletchley Park. One factor united all of them: all women. The men were being prepared to go into armed combat. At that time, women were not allowed to go into armed combat. So about 2,500 women from Women's Auxiliary Air Force, Women's Royal Navy and the Auxiliary Territorial Service, i.e. the Women's Army, were recruited to work here. And most of those were billeted in barracks which were purpose-built for them in the surrounding countryside. The really lucky ones were billeted at Woburn Abbey, so they got to live on the Duke of Bedfordshire's estate. They then needed, still weren't enough personnel to meet the needs, so people were headhunted from the civil service, accountancy firms, translating firms, anywhere there were people that felt with skills, and they even got people, the competition winners. If any of you have seen the film The Imitation Game, anyone seen? Yeah. The bit where Keira Knightley gets recruited to work at Bletchley Park, she does a crossword with a challenge. Can you do this crossword in under 12 minutes? If so, phone this number. That competition really existed in the Daily Telegraph, and the Bletchley Park contacted the winners and invited them for further assessment to see whether they will make good codebreakers. In the end, about 7,500, 8,000 people recruited to come and work here. Pretty huge workforce. They didn't all arrive at the same time through this gate here, which was the main entrance at the time, which is why I've started here. They worked in shifts. Bletchley Park ran 24 hours a day. So we had, various shifts starting 8 a.m, 4 p.m, midnight. The reason why Bletchley Park ran for 24 hours a day is that the Enigma code was changed every day at midnight. The machines were reset. And if you hadn't cracked a day's messages by midnight, you had to start again from scratch the next day, because there was no logical connection between one day's setting and the next. So that's why we were running 24 hours a day. On your first day here, having received your letter from the government telling you to report for duty, you would say you would walk up this avenue here, which was just a tree-lined avenue, no houses at that time, come through this gate, be met by a security officer, member of the military police at this gatehouse just behind you. Your paperwork will be checked, you will be searched in case you might happen to be an enemy agent, here are false pretenses, so you'll search for guns, bombs, cameras, etc. Something you'd get used to, because you would be searched every day as you came in and every day as you went out. You would then be marched up to the manor for the next part of your induction, and unless you had been recruited to be one of the very top brass here, there was a very high probability at that time, as you walked up to the mansion, you would have no idea what you were doing here. You knew you were recruited for, clearly they want me for my skills, but what am I doing here? This secrecy was a key element of life here at Bletchley Park. I'll explain more up at the moment. Any questions before we move? No? Okay. So, you'll be marched up to the mansion on your first day, possibly taken to this office here, which was the office of Commander Denniston, who was the head of Bletchley Park for most of World War II. By all accounts, very much a man of his time, irascible, short-tempered, didn't suffer fools gladly, very much a linear thinker, but just so typical of commanders of that age. You will then you will be required to sign the Official Secrets Act, a government document in which you basically promise that under no circumstances will you divulge any information about what you were doing here at Bletchley Park. Penalty for doing so with the intention of helping the enemy, well, that was treason basically, penalty for which was death. But the penalty for doing so, even incidentally, was still severe. So for example, Saturday night, off duty, you're down the pub. You start chatting about what you're doing here, start moaning about the workload and start talking about a difficult piece of code breaking you've been working on. Denniston had military police in plain clothes stationed around the local area. You could be, if heard talking about your work here, you'll be arrested. Minimum sentence was 2 years in prison, maximum up to 7 years of hard labour. Secrecy is taken very seriously. But in addition, remember, it's wartime and a very different culture as to what constitutes secrets and keeping secrets. If you've seen, any films or documentaries, television programs about wartime, you often see this thing, people saying, so tell me about this. No, can't possibly tell you, my friend, it's all terribly hush-hush. And you just accept that. Okay, that was the culture. People did not post stuff on social media about every aspect of their life. It didn't exist. The whole attitude towards secrecy was very different. And just to help you in keeping things secret, you were told by the leaders here as little as possible about what you were doing. There were people who worked here for the entire war who did not know this was a code-breaking centre. They just thought they were translating various German documents. They thought they were just working through masses of figures, or they were just there to send messages from a government department to another. Obviously, the higher up the food chain you went, the more you knew. But lots of people did not know what was going on here. And you didn't talk, you say you didn't talk about your work to other people, to the extent that we are aware of couples who met shortly after the war, got married, and obviously talking about what they did, during the war. Oh, I done terribly war. I just did the accounts for some obscure government department, or I wrote public information leaflets. And these were the typical cover stories people used when they worked at Bletchley Park. And these couples got married 30 odd years later. They both received envelopes from Bletchley Park inviting them to a reunion of veterans. And that was the first time they had an inkling. They'd been working within about 50 metres of each other for 4 years during the war.
Wow.
That's the level of secrecy. This is a picture of some of the workers at Bletchley Park taken on VE Day at the end of the war. So they're all 5 years older than when they started. You'll see they are still quite young. Typical age of people working here was 18 to early 20s. Remember, a lot of university students, a lot of young women recruited from the armed forces. Also, for those of you who know anything about clothing at the period, you'll see that the women are very well dressed. That's after a wartime of rationing. This is one of the indicators towards the social classes of the people who worked here. Remember, the standard school leaving age was 14. If you were going to reach a level of literacy and numeracy to enable you to work here or to go to university, it meant that your family could afford for you not to go to work at 14 and bring income into the family. They could afford to pay your school fees and afford to pay you to attend the university. Also, the government actively recruited people from the upper social classes. I know this sounds weird, but the thinking was, remember we are talking 1930s mindset here, the thinking was that people from the upper social classes were more trustworthy. You can't trust those nasty working class people, let's recruit toffs to come and work here. If you've heard any of the soundscapes, these little sound recordings we have occasionally as you go around, to give atmosphere to the place, you'll notice they are all in terribly upper class voices. Mm-hmm. And that does reflect a significant proportion of the workforce here. So, it's 1939 England, you just accept that's what it was like here. So, You've arrived here, you sign the official sequence out, and off you go to do your task, and you'll be assigned in one of the huts. I don't know if you've had a chance to go through huts 3 or 6. You good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Very, very nice.
Involved in anti-aircraft recognition. So people who are going to become things like air raid wardens or machine guns will be sent here to learn how to recognise aircraft at night and how to operate searchlights and things like that. So yes, a government centre, but fairly low security. And given that there were, nothing was being said about there being, tanks or guns or stored here, it was just a training centre. It was quite low priority. So it meant that if the Germans found out about the place, it diminished the chances of it being bombed. In fact, Bletchley Park was only ever hit by one bomb, as far as we know. That was, we think there was a bomber which had gone on one of the raids to one of the northern industrial cities. For whatever reason, did not drop its bombs there and turned round to head back home. And rather than take the bomb, how do we get from here to here? So, let's start here. German Army Commander, I don't know his real name, but I'll call him Commandant Schultz. He wishes to send a message about his intended plans back to German High Command. So he composes his message, and the Commandant takes it to the men down here, one of which is operating an Enigma machine. Now, I don't know how much chance you've had to look around. Say, have you found out anything much about the Enigma machine so far? Bits?
Yep.
60-second summary of how an Enigma machine works?
They used to have instructions on how to use it.
Yep. So, essentially, the basics are, you have an old-fashioned typewriter keyboard. Above that, there's a panel of lights, one for each letter of the alphabet. When you press a key on the keyboard, a light comes on to give you the encryption for that letter. However, every day at midnight, or when the first message of the day is about to be sent, the operator opens up the lid, and you might just be able to see 3 little curves there. They're the tops of 3 rotors. Metal wheels attached to which are cassettes full of wires. And the operator will look at his code book for the day. He'll have a line with that day's data in it, which will tell him how to set the machine up. He will select 3 of the rotors from a box of 5. He will put them in the Enigma machine at a certain position, which is told, that's in the code book. Shut the lid. He opens up the front. There are then 26 sockets, one for each letter of the alphabet. He's got 10 wires, and he will wire 10 pairs of letters together according to his instructions. 6 are left unwired. And then close the top. He then has he enters a password for the day, and then he will start typing in the message. Every time you hit a key on the Enigma machine, these rotors move round, rewiring the machine. So if you press X once, J might light up. Press X again, T might light up. Press X again, A might light up. Anything apart from X will light up. Okay? And that's constantly changing every time you press a key. So the rotors are going around. So knowing that starting position is of paramount importance, but there are millions and millions and millions of possible starting positions, given all those permutations of how the machine can be set up. That's why the Enigma code was so difficult to break. So, machine is typed into there, and out comes a string of disconnected letters, which are the code. That's then passed on to radio operators, and the message is then transmitted back to German High Command using Morse code. Morse code chosen because, given the radio technology of the day, that's a single high frequency bleep is going to travel much better over the airwaves than any other type of signal. So Morse code is sent over the airwaves, and in Berlin there will be somebody with a radio receiver tuned into the frequencies. They will hear the message, they will write down the Morse code. That's the letters from the Morse code are then handed over to an Enigma operator who has their machine set up in exactly the same way according to that day's settings. They'll type the message into the Enigma machine, and out will come German. And then it's passed through the various departments to the desk of Adolf Hitler or whichever member of the hierarchy it's intended for. That's the job done as far as the Germans are concerned. Okay? Took about 2.5 hours for that whole process to take place. But meanwhile, in various locations in Britain, particularly around the coast and on hilltops around the country, are women from the Women's Royal Navy, particularly skilled in signals and communication, who are listening in to the German radio frequencies. And they, you know, for 8 hours they will sit there just waiting for those frequencies to come alive, and they will write down, they hear the Morse code and write down the letters of the message. Really challenging, because Morse code, a bit like predictive, you know, it's the same as predictive text. You get half a word, you predict what the rest of the half other words can be. So if there's a bit of static on the line, or if the operator makes a mistake, you can guess what the word was probably going to be. However, when you've just got a disconnected string of letters, it's infinitely harder. So they worked in pairs. You can see there's another one just behind. Tuning to the safe frequency and comparing the messages. They would write them down on forms that look like that. Okay? The government department spent many weeks, I'm sure, coming up with a name for these at a cost of millions of pounds, and they named them the Red Forms. Wonderful piece of government efficiency. The bit at the top here is where and when the signal was picked up. That is the header of the message which the operator would send, which includes the operator's password, which was encrypted in a certain way, and then there's the bulk of the message. You can see there are bits here where we haven't got 5 characters in a box. That was probably due to static on the line, or the Morse code operator making an error and sending, you know, a pattern of dots and dashes, which didn't make any sense. But you know, you've got the bulk of the message here, and over the course of an 8-hour shift, you would build up a real stack of sheets of paper from all these messages coming in. They then have to be transported to Bletchley Park as quickly and safely as possible. By about 1944, we did have a highly encrypted telegram system that made it safe to send them over the airwaves. But prior to that, the government wasn't willing to send these messages from the listening stations to Bletchley Park over the airwaves because of fears that German spies would be tapping into them. And just think how that would give the game away if a message sent by a German commandant was then picked up being broadcast by the British half an hour later. It's not good, is it? And you know, you just track down you get your spies to track down the phone lines, and then the game's given away. So they made the decision they would actually physically bring the messages here as quickly as possible. The method they chose break down every 10 minutes. So no AA or REC, you've got to get off and fix the thing yourself in the middle of the night, in the rain. So through rain, sleet, hail, bomb craters, whatever, you're bringing these messages here to Bletchley Park. So, hold in your mind, if you would please for me, an image of a typical Bletchley Park motorcycle courier riding through the night, you know, against all odds to bring the messages here. And then let's see if that image that you're holding matches the picture of the Bletchley Park motorcycle courier. Of course it's women. The men, you know, who might otherwise be doing this work are away fighting or being trained to fight. Women were not allowed to enter into armed combat. Hence, they did everything else that, you know, that needed to be done in the armed forces. This was a time when riding a motorbike was, you know, not daring, risque, unladylike.
Both sides, by the way.
Next up, my thing.
I choose my phone as my battery died on my phone. I mean on my camera, so I'm using my phone right now. So we are inside here. So that's where they brought all the codes. So yeah. So now we're just going outside again. It's cold. So yeah, it's really interesting. And as we were talking about, it was like how nobody knew the place. So like, that's what is important, like secrecy and keeping they are secure. So only people who needed to know the information knew about it. So, but yeah, it was crazy. Oh, it was crazy. So we are here. Activity. Well, there's no activity yet. Right. So this is where they went. I think most of the. What's what they called? Those ones. Oh, bombers.
Oh, this one.
Yeah. So yeah, most of them they. What? So they bend them. They bend them.
Abandoned?
No, I mean they bend them. After they finish. So after the war, they destroy them. So, and then also like the place was also wanted to be sold away. Yeah, here it's colder than outside for some reason. So yeah, they. Oh, what a gentleman! Thank you. So basically, what happened is so basically they wanted to sell the building, which was like crazy. But after people found out about it, I found out about the place. A lot of people decided to keep it, and the pride regarding it of the building. So that's why like now we still have it, which is like really important in terms of history-wise for what happened. So yeah.
Hello.
So yeah, this is where.
They got hats and scarves and all sorts over there. Shoulders, knees and toes.
You cannot touch it.
Yeah.
You cannot touch it.
I've just decoded a message from him. It says right.
Oh, so look at that. I thought, why not? They got giant
Miller himself.
loads of toilet paper.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Yo, the old man called you slow. Yo, have you heard? The old man called you slow.
The German Navy have introduced a new layer of encryption to their Enigma machine, the fourth rotor. HMS Batard and 3 other warships are on the scene by 10 a.m. They spend the next 10 hours hunting and depth charging the U-boat. Night has fallen and the submarine was finally forced to surface after sustaining serious damage. Chaotic scenes unfold as the enemy crew start to abandon ship.
Physical attributes mean that it usually comes out victorious in an encounter with a pigeon. Usually, but not always. Expert pigeon breeder Charlie Brewer pigeon says, but she was not allowed to rest on her laurels.
Pigeons were so
I thought these were just part of the character,
particularly
I guess
the owner
it looks like a license though.
GD19 was asked to ensure that she could be put back into
It looks like a license. It looks like a license.
Mary was given 22 stitches in her chest and sent back to the front line. Over and over she braved the Falcons, and they just couldn't stop her.
Penguin.
Coming back from these missions with horrendous injuries.
It's alright,
Although she came back in India. But she carried on. Died peacefully in operation. Her body is very
I can't walk in front of you. Concrete just fell. I just fell back. It was like a right massive step in between where the plate just went like that. I think quite early from this side, didn't it?
Yeah, upstairs. Thank you.
Is that in public interest too? Yeah. So are you comfortable?
It's to see which one is a real website and which one is a fake one. Okay. So it's really hard to be able to know that.
This one was.
You see?
Obvious.
That one is fake. Why?
There's no sort of suspicious.
This one is fake.
Why is this fake, you say? Why do you say this is a fake website? It's not fake. It's a real one. Okay.
These two are fake.
Let's see.
You see the address.
Uh-huh.
And this one, airlines meme.com.
So, okay, we got those two there, which are fakes. Because of the, what you got here on there. This one at the top.
Suspicious.
At the beginning. It's what he has at the beginning,
I
isn't
know Dropbox
it? So,
yeah, it's not right.
Yeah, it's what.
This one is fake.
Yeah.
That's real?
Yeah, Dropbox is.
So that's a real one because you can see from the top itself.
HTTPS. It's not HTTP, so there's nothing to be here.
So this one,
Look at this.
That's real.
it looks real.
Suspicious that one.
Look at this. We are sending this email to you.
Yeah, okay. No,
Well, we can separate which one is real.
we could put that as a dodgy one.
Which one is the dodgy one?
So these three are dodgy.
Dodgy ones, yeah?
Okay, so do we have someone This one is real. That one is.
That one.
Pens down. Looks real.
Website's down. We have the same question.
Yeah, this one is real.
Yeah, okay.
Which one's that?
Okay, yeah.
Which one's this one?
But except that.
We'll look in detail about how that's all set up. Okay, so how many fake ones did you get? 7. Okay, that's correct. So, who put your hand up if you thought this was a fake one? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Any particular reason? Can someone give me a reason?
The URL.
URL. Yeah. Okay. What about this one? Put your hand up if you thought this was a fake. Okay, so pretty good at this. Reason? Give me a reason.
Yeah, all 9.info.
Yeah,
Just
URL
like
also.
the 9.info.
So the graphics. Okay. This one. Put your hand up if you've got this one. That's fake.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone. Brilliant. Good. Any particular reason? No HTTPS. Well, actually, is that true? I mean, there's very few websites now that don't have security. What kind of security do they use? What does it mean? Encryption, which is asymmetric.
Yeah.
So it's public or private key, which is. I mean, we're going to be looking at symmetric encryption with the Enigma machine in a moment. Okay, but in fact, you know, Google and so on flag up websites that don't have security, and it doesn't mean even scary. And cyber attack. Okay, have there been any recent cyber attacks anyone can talk about? What happened this week?
Oh, there's an attack.
A DDoS attack on who?
The Labour
Labour Party, yeah, excellent. And of course the problem with that is what? That how can you stop that? Which is very hard to do if it's distributed, isn't it? And what else happened in terms of Hong Kong? Anyone been following the Hong Kong protests? So their message service was blocked, so we couldn't use it. So quite interesting things going on. Okay, I've got another exercise for you to do. Of course, spies always carry briefcases. Now, there's
Go for it. Do the other.
You could sit here, it'd take longer, but you'd eventually get there. But what you'd be doing about 900, that possibly 1 million combinations on there.
So
you actually got the answer.
We've got a 3-key lock. Can anyone tell me the number of permutations possible for that?
I'm not sure how you would do this, I guess. That sounds different.
So we got an answer of 1,000, and every unit in the German Army, Navy and Air Force. So if what does it look like? Anyone tell me something it resembles?
Typewriter.
Typewriter, yeah. How does it differ from a typewriter? How many keys are there?
Only 25.
There's only alphabetical keys.
Yeah.
And
So how many letters in the alphabet? Anyone?
26.
26. Well done. 26 key number. So remember that number 26. It's going to go a long way. So there's no numbers, so they have to be written out as words. There's no punctuation or anything like that. So very simple in that respect. How does it work? Well, I'll open it up and we'll have a look inside. Encryption by the Germans. Is the question? No.
I don't know, just guess.
Well, you had a 50% chance of getting that right, which is very good. That's good. You're absolutely right. It wasn't actually. This part of it was commercially available. It was actually designed in 1918, manufactured and sold in 1921 by Arthur Scherbius, who built a factory in Germany. And the UK, for instance, bought one. It was used in the Spanish Civil War. And it had the keyboard, it had the lamp board, and it had the rotors. It didn't have the front piece, which I'll show you in a moment. And so it was used for banking, for large businesses to keep secure their communication. Germans thought this is a really good idea. This could be used, very useful. And we'll look at levels of encryption as we go through. So they amended it, and they made it much more secure. So they actually added this front piece, which is a plug board. Now the plug board has 26 holes. It actually has double plugs because if nothing's plugged in, it carries on through. The connection carries on through, so A will still be A. It's only when you plug a lead in that it changes. So it's electromechanical. You press the key down, it causes a circuit, so the current flows through the plug board, through the first of these rotors, which you can move around, then through the second rotor, then through the third rotor, to a reflector, where the wiring is changed once again. So each time it goes through one of these stages of encryption, the letter is changed from one letter to another letter. Goes back through the 3 rotors, back through the plug board, and then to the lamp. So if we look at the rotor in more detail, these rotors, of course, can come out. So the machine is supplied with this side. Are you okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Operator or commandant?
Operator.
Okay. And we need a commandant. You okay?
Good.
All right. Thank you. So what we need to do is think of a message. I'm going to use a password here of AKB, which is 1, 11 and 2. So operator, can you just set the dials for me? So we need 1 on that side.
Yeah, 1, yeah.
Yeah. And then 11.
Yeah.
And then 2, 02.
Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. So we need to think of to another. So
how would that have been sent?
Morse code.
Morse code, absolutely. Morse code through the radio. Do you think the German
of computer? So,
Ice cream on sale.
right.
I think they even used an Enigma machine.
All right.
So
Okay.
what we read the 60 millisecond pulse. That is the peak of engineering. Really quite useful. That message is in plain text. It's not encrypted. But this is what it should sound like. So what's this?
Morse code.
Morse code. Do you know how many characters a minute you can send using Morse code? And I have asked people. It's about 30. So if you want to send a message from Enigma, it might take you 3 or 4 minutes. But at the time. This is the way in which Colossus is storing the data from the second tape. These are called pyrotrons, and there's 501 of them.